আপনারা অনেকেই নিশ্চয়ই আসমা খানের নাম শুনেছেন, ব্রিটিশ শেফ এবং রেস্টুরেন্টিয়ার। তিনি আমাদের ইন্ডিয়ান বর্ন, উই আর ভেরি প্রাউড অফ হার। এবং সব থেকে আসল কথাটাই তো বললাম না, সেটা হচ্ছে যে কুক বুক, তার লেখা কুক বুক সারা পৃথিবীতে আদৃত। সো আসমা ইজ ওয়েটিং ফর আস, অ্যান্ড অলসো Shalmoli Mukherjee has to leave for the book fair. She is going to moderate this particular session, and the other participants are Lily Kelting and Robin Ghose. We would be calling all the panelists up on the dais. Asma, of course, is going to join us online. But meanwhile, Paromita Munshi আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত আছেন। তিনি আমাদের 5 মিনিটের জন্য একটু কবিতা পাঠ করে শোনাবেন।
নমস্কার, আমি পারমিতা মুন্সি। আমি পেশায় একজন চিত্রনাট্যকার, সিনেমা বানাই একটু আধটু। শীর্ষেন্দু মুখোপাধ্যায়ের গুহা মানব নিয়ে সিনেমা বানিয়েছি। আমার মূল পরিচয় কবি। আমার 4টে কবিতার বই আছে, তীব্র মধ্যম বেরিয়েছে আনন্দ পাবলিশার্স থেকে। আমাকে যখন বলা হয়েছিল এখানে কবিতা পড়ার জন্য, তো লহমা বলেছিল যে তুমি তোমার যা ইচ্ছে তুমি পড়তে পারো, কিন্তু আমি ঠিক করলাম যে আমি মিষ্টি নিয়ে একটু কবিতা লিখবো। কারণ মিষ্টি ব্যাপারটাই তো খুব রোমান্টিসিজম এখানে, মানে দুধ থেকে মিষ্টি হওয়া প্রসেস আপনারা ভাবুন, পুরো ব্যাপারটার মধ্যে রোমান্টিসিজম আছে। তো আর আমার কাছে মিষ্টি, প্রেম সব কিছু মানে একই মিলেমিশে গেছে। তো আমি 2টো কবিতা পড়বো, 5 মিনিট সময় লাগবে। প্রথম কবিতা রসগোল্লা। অভিনয় পুরোটাই। ফার্স্ট সিন থেকে যদি ধরো, রসগোল্লা। অভিনয় পুরোটাই। ফার্স্ট সিন থেকে যদি ধরো, দেখবে মোদ্দা গল্প একটাই, ছানা চটকে দলা করে রসে ফেলে দেওয়া। সব সম্পর্কের একই ধরন, তবুও কোনো ছানাগোলা রসে ফুলে ওঠে, কোনোটা বা ফেটে চুরচুর হয়ে যায়। কেন? গরদ গোড়াতেই দুধে জল বেশি মিশ খেয়ে গেলে সে ছানা ভেজাল হবে। তখন ময়রা তাতে যতই ঠাস বুনন দিক, যতই চাঁদ তারা অগ্নিসাক্ষী থাক, হাজার লোকের পাত পড়ুক, সম্পর্ক ফাটবেই। তাহলে বুঝে দেখো, সব সম্পর্কই এক গতে বাঁধা, হাতে হাত, ঠোঁটে ঠোঁট সবই হয়, কিন্তু ওই যাকে বলে আঠা নেই। কামড় দিলেই ছিবড়ে মনে হয়, স্বাদহীন, পানসে। তবুও কখনো শেষ দৃশ্যে টুইস্ট আসে। ধরো ঘোরালো নেশার সন্ধে, লাল নীল সবুজ চোখ ধাঁধানো ইনফিউশনের মাঝে তুমি, উপেক্ষা বুঝে চলে যাচ্ছি আমি, আর ফিরে আসবো না। জানি তুমিও রসে মজে গেছো, আমাকে আটকাবে না। প্রেডিক্টেবিলিটির চূড়ান্ত ধাপে যখন গল্প এগোচ্ছে স্লো মোশনে, তখন সহসা তুমি পেছন থেকে হাত টেনে ধরলে, বললে ছেড়ে চলে যেও না আমাকে। অপ্রত্যাশিত ক্লাইম্যাক্স জুড়ে হাততালির বন্যা। নাটকে দর্শক বলে ওঠে, জানতুম খাঁটি ছানার সাদা রসগোল্লাই শেষ চালে মাত দিয়ে যাবে। আর একটা ছোট্ট কবিতা, মিহিদানা। হ্যাঁ ছিল, লোভ ছিল শুরুতে, ছিল আকর্ষণ, কামনা, খিদে। অপ্রস্তুত অবস্থায় মুঠোবন্দি করতে চেয়েছিলাম, আঙুলের ফাঁক গলে খসে পড়ে গেছে। সময় গড়িয়েছে, চাঁদের আলোয় হাত পেতে তোমাকে দেখাই, এই দেখো করতলে পল্লবিত জ্যোৎস্না। তুমি ঠোঁট মুচড়ে বলো, এসব কষ্ট কল্পনা রাখো, মাটিতে তাকাও, বেঁচে থাকা আসলে চরম বাস্তব। এইসব চাঁদ, জ্যোৎস্না, তারা দিয়ে আর কতদিন নিজেকে আড়ালে রাখবে? রোদে দাঁড়াও, দেখবে পৃথিবীতে রক্ত ঘাম ছাড়া আর কোনো সত্যি নেই। আমি তোমার মনের মতো হয়ে ওঠার চেষ্টা করি, বলি হ্যাঁ ঠিক বলেছো তুমি। মানুষের ঘাম, স্বেদ, বলি আর বন জ্যোৎস্নায় তোমার শ্বেত গন্ধ ইন্দ্রিয় গোচর হয়। তুমি যত এলাচের পাঠ পড়াও আমাকে, আমি তত ফুটন্ত পলাশের উপমায় তোমাকে দেখি। ঘন চিনির রসে পাক খায় অপ্রতুল দানা ভাজা। এসব রস দানা নিজেদের মধ্যে পাক খেতে খেতে একদিন নিশ্চিত মিহিদানা হয়ে উঠবে দেখো। তখন হাতের মুঠোয় একবার চেপে ধরলে এক জীবনে মুঠো শিথিল হবে না। নমস্কার, সবাই ভালো থাকুন, মিষ্টিতে থাকুন। আমি খুবই মিষ্টিতে থাকি, আপনারাও থাকুন। নমস্কার।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ। এবারে তাহলে আমরা শুরু করছি আমাদের ফোর্থ প্যানেল। আমি একটু মডারেটর এবং সেই সঙ্গে প্যানেলিস্টদের চলে আসার জন্যে অনুরোধ জানাচ্ছি। প্যানেলটির শিরোনাম হচ্ছে ইজ মিষ্টি সেক্সিস্ট, অর্থাৎ কিনা যে আমাদের মা ঠাকুমা দিদিমারা যারা কিনা মানে পরিবারের মহিলারা, they are let's say the keepers of our recipes. সেই রেসিপি মিষ্টিরও তো অবশ্যই, কিন্তু যখন তারা পেশাগতভাবে এই মিষ্টি বানানোর ক্ষেত্রে যেতে চান, তখন কিন্তু তাদেরকে ঠিক সেই পেশাদারের সম্মানটা দেওয়া হয় না বা গ্রহণই করা হয় না। সো obviously there are fixed gender roles still associated with this particular trade. So we are going to talk about that. May I request all the panelists to kindly take their seats. আর প্যানেলিস্টরা তৈরি হতে হতে, কেননা আপনারা সকলেই জানেন যে আসমা আমাদেরকে অনলাইনেও জয়েন করবেন, একটু সময় লাগবে। আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত আছেন শ্রী দেবাশিস কুমার, আজকে এসেছেন এখানে। আমি মিস্টার ঘোষকে একটু অনুরোধ জানাতে পারি জুগলসের পক্ষ থেকে। ও, এইবারে আমি কানেকশনটা বুঝলাম, জুগলস দেশপ্রিয় পার্ক। মাননীয় বিধায়ক এবং সেই সঙ্গে পুরসভার এক অন্যতম নাগরিক বলা যেতে পারে শ্রী দেবাশিস কুমার, এবারে তাকে বরণ করে নিলেন জুগলসের অন্যতম কর্ণধার শ্রী ঘোষ।
Where's Lily? No, and Lily is also part of it. Okay, let me start and you can. Oh, then I'll wait for a minute. Okay, good evening, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure tonight to host this apparently the most controversial topic of the day, is Mishti Sexist. So basically the whole idea is to do a sex determination analysis of Mishti today. So I would like to start with a question. How do you look at Mishti? How do you characterize Mishti? Anybody? Anybody in the audience? Anybody in the panel? Hi, Asma.
Hi. Well, as nobody else is replying, let me try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think for me, Mishti is very feminine, very Bengali, very beautiful and elegant. And I've always seen every kind of Mishti in a very feminine form, which is interesting considering that most people in this industry are men, not just men who make it, but also men who sell it. But for some reason, for me, always, Mishti, for me, if I had to imagine that this was a person, I would imagine it to be a very, very elegant woman, but not a young person, someone who actually has lived a life.
Right. So I was actually going to make it simpler and characterize Mishti as, the sweetest, what comes to mind, strong outside and soft inside, maybe attractive, intelligent, shall we call it? Yeah. So I think it defines itself. It is feminine, like Asma said, very much. But let us get into a little more serious story about, what is the story behind Mishti and how it all started. So if we go look into the history, it's basically started as a part of offerings to the gods. I'm sure you might be bored by the end of the day and listening to the same story again and again. But it started as a home craft where women used to make mishti in the house to offer to the gods. It's one of the stories. There are many. And the idea was to actually give the purest food to the god. So it would be actually milk, sugar, and things like that, and not mixed with anything else. So that's how it started. And it was started by obviously then grandmothers, mothers, and then handed over in generations. And even a new bride or a notun beau coming to the house was asked to add to the repertoire and see what she can add to the Mishti family. So, and those actually became the family heirlooms as they were handed down as recipes. And some of them have actually got lost in the process because we have no records of them. So, coming to the panel, I would like to ask Lily first because she has been working on the wonderful heritage food of the world and reviving them. So Lily, is it the same story all over the world? If we see that, is it women or is it, who started this whole thing about, the kitchen? Who looks after the kitchen? Is it the whole thing in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for every community in the entire planet, probably a good thing. But certainly in the case studies that I'm looking at, there's a huge gap between what happens in home kitchens and what happens in professional kitchens, with a kind of a weird intermediary zone of what gets documented in cookbooks and what gets documented through kind of now social media, previously blogs, and I think that the same pattern, that the kind of higher visibility, higher paid, professionalized spaces tend to be documented like mostly men, and that the home cooking and the kind of uncelebrated, invisible work of daily cooking and keeping culinary heritage alive tends to be done by women. I mean, I think that's pretty world over, unfortunately.
Well, that's the reality you're talking about. But then, if it all started with the women in the kitchen, then what do you think is the role that the women play in propagating or taking this forward in the future?
I think it's huge. I mean, I am working on a book on this topic, as those of you who very generously paid attention to my speech earlier. And I conclude the book with this kind of polemic, I guess, like a really impassioned argument for revaluing women's culinary labor. I was just downstairs eating this delicious, I don't remember the Bengali name, but like a coconut poha, like a coconut that has been cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked.
Yes.
That. And I was just thinking, like, the amount of time, that it will take to reduce this into something that is in a different form. And it's so kind of in a level simple, 2 ingredients. So if I think about, preserving culinary heritage, like what's the recipe, what's in it, it's like, well, nothing much is in it, it's just 2 ingredients. But the thing that's unaccounted for is all of that time. Just so much time it takes to make sweets, to make these specialized dishes that are
and it
celebration
doesn't have
foods.
any written recipe. Most of these things don't have any written recipe as well.
Because often, like, what would you write? You know, for some, it's like, keep stirring, you know, just keep at it, kind of. And I think that time is something that has no value, you know, within most, even culinary frameworks. And in the framework of fine dining, then it has value because people are willing to pay, like, hundreds of euros, basically, for like trained chefs' labor, but people are totally unwilling to think about women's domestic labor as having any value. So that's why I really think, you know, for my side, my goal is actually to kind of make it as big and as philosophical and as radical as possible, to say, like, we need to return to these idealistic feminist movements of the 60s and 70s. You know, we really need to think about, like, culinary knowledge as knowledge. We need to think about culinary skill as having value.
So we'll come back to
stuff.
it in details when we talk about women and, you know, how it is grown in kitchen. But in your research, quickly, just to know, is there a differentiation between job allocation of men and women? Have you gone through any of that in your research?
No, and I think something that I can definitely say is, like, having done research on culinary cultures in the Nordic region, where people talk a lot about gender parity. You know, we're trying to copy, like, maternity leave, paternity leave policies from the Nordic countries because they're so gender equal and so gender advanced, and it's, like, so exciting. And I'm often kind of in conversation with scholars who are doing that work, and in fine dining or in the culinary sphere, there's none of that. Like, you don't see any of that, like, so-called Nordic gender parity, I think, in the culinary sphere. So I think it's sadly, I have no really great positive examples to give you.
Right. So that brings me to you, Asma. Actually, I think you are the most eminent amongst all of us here to talk about, you know, the whole world. And with your roots, Indian roots, and your Western exposure, my first question to you is, I was very surprised when I read about it, is why did you open Darjeeling Express with an all-women team?
Well, initially, I had not planned to open a restaurant, and having an all-female team, I can easily say that now was my intention. It wasn't. What I was trying to look for were women who cooked like me. I'm a home cook, and we cook intuitively. So many of our recipes is not written, and we don't do mass cooking, batch cooking, you know, in stainless steel empires. If you look at all the prominent Indian chefs in India or abroad, their CVs are identical, almost. They all learned to cook in culinary school, then they went on to five-star hotels and did their training there. None of them learned to cook from their mothers, grandmothers. It's a very different style of cooking. So when I wanted to get help with my cooking, I wanted to cook, you know, for a larger number of people, I looked for women who would understand intuitively what was happening. This kind of non-verbal communication is a great strength of women who have cooked in communities, you know, where they've cooked for Eid or Diwali or Holi and weddings together. You know, this whole idea of all the aunts and the mothers and grandmothers coming in and cooking. There is no hierarchy in the kitchen. Why we are in such trouble in the West? Because of this brigade system of hierarchy, as if everyone has ranks, everyone pulls ranks, everybody calls out. This is not how women can cook when they cook in a community. So for me, this was my safe space. I felt comfortable cooking with women, and that's how I started, not as a restaurant, but as some of you know, I started from my home, then I moved to a pop-up, and then I had my first restaurant. And the reason why I am not there, and I apologize to everybody, my entire intention was to be there. I think what Lahana is doing is amazing. I think Jugal has a great story, is because my restaurant opened a few days ago, and I couldn't leave it. We got delayed because of electricity and gas issues, which I will not bore you with. But I think that this is so significant that you do not see. I just want to say this, that in every home you go to in South Asia, from Afghanistan to Sri Lanka, the matriarch of women are in power or cooking. Every restaurant you go to, which is middle level and above, from our entire region in India or in the West where they are cooking Indian food, it is all men who are in power. Somehow, no one wants to pay us for our roti. And I am, at this moment, the only Indian restaurant which has an all-female kitchen in the world at this point.
I think we should
Which
clap
is
to
shocking.
that. Amazing.
Because you have places like Suruchi, you've got places in Nizamuddin. This is, at a different level because it is a more charity, NGOs, social enterprise. But where someone comes into my restaurant, I'm in the heart of London and pays, over £100 for a meal per head. This is the thing. We are the only all-female Indian restaurant in the world. There isn't even one in India at the level that we are. So, it is really sad that, for me, this is not something that I'm proud of, that I am the only one. I want to see this whole narrative change.
Absolutely. I agree. You have raised such a valid point, but that's what brings me to I was thinking while he was saying, why is it that, every time we talk about women getting into commercial kitchen, that we talk about pains and what challenges they have to face, and why is it like that, and what do you think this is all about?
Well, it is just pure bias. It is pure bias. Because when you even forget Indian cuisine, when you go into other cultures, cuisines of other cultures, you will find women there, but they're not the ones in power. There are a handful of women who are powerful, who I have to say are very silent when evidence comes out of abuse, bullying, racism in kitchens. These women close ranks with the male chefs who have been accused of bullying. You will never find, if you look at all the British press, the only person who's written in newspapers risking being sued for libel is me. Whenever there has been proved evidence of bullying and racism in the kitchen and massive sexual harassment of women in kitchens, none of the powerful female chefs who have Michelin stars speak up. Not once. There's not a single time they have spoken up. This is our problem. It's very cliquey. It's a closed club. Everybody is everyone's friend. And if you are the outsider, you remain the outsider. For me, the fact that I'm so different from everybody, this is what makes me powerful. I can speak up. I owe nothing to anybody. No one can destroy me and no one can bring me down. So me and my brigade of women are so powerful because we're running our own race. And this is a problem in the West, that there is this, women run different races from men, but they never talk about it. Women are jumping more hurdles. We have more hoops. Our race is more difficult. How are we expected to win? But as a woman of color, I do not run the same race as a white woman in hospitality. White women have an easier race in hospitality than someone of color. And I'm a female founder, I'm a sole female founder. It's a challenging time, but I can tell you one thing, irrespective of all the hurdles on which I have fallen, I have bled. I have been defeated many times. I still won. I won because you have that Shakti that comes from being a collective of women. It's not my success, it's the success of a collective of women, which is why I am where I am today.
So you have actually raised, I think she's opened a fire pot here, and I think we should move into, because I was listening to some of the earlier conversations and people are talking about training women and how women should come back into the Mishti industry specifically all afternoon. And I've been wondering, but we like as women, we have always been in the kitchen and taught, and it is a part of our system to know that what gets how much salt and what gets how much sugar. So, it's not a process that we really need to learn. It is the power. You've hit the right note. And on that, I move on to Robinda, who's actually doing the most interesting work and amazing. Thank you. I didn't know about it, and I just got to know that you have the first Mishti Academy in India, and you're training women to, kind of make more Mishtis and learn, revive Mishtis. So, Robinda, please tell us, about your vision and how you go about it.
By profession, I'm an
Microphone, take it. It's on, I think it's on. It is on already. Yes.
Yeah. By profession, I'm an economist, and I'm also a serial entrepreneur. And I also run 2 NGOs, one in Shantiniketan, one in Calcutta. And my focus has been women's empowerment. And I have been an amateur research person on Mishti for a decade. And as an economist, I have found that the Mishti making and Mishti business has a huge opportunity for empowerment of women. Unfortunately, if you visit any of the Mishti shop anywhere in the country, there are two things happen. One is that if you go to Agra, if you go to Bulandshahr, if you go to Jalandhar, if you go to Benares, or many towns on UP and Bihar, you'll find boards saying Bengali sweets. All over they write Bengali sweets or Bengali mithai. But none of them are Bengali, in fact. They are all fake Bengali sweets. And in fact, people rush to those shops and buy thinking that this is Bengali sweets. But they are all fusion ones. They are not Bengali sweets. That's part one. Part two is that, around 1908, I heard, I haven't seen, but there is a document which says that we had about 108 types of mistis, out of which only 35 still survive. Most of them have been lost. The recipe is lost, the karigars are lost, the name of the mishti is lost. So I felt this is a great heritage which we have. The Bengalis have a lot of heritage portfolios, but one of them is certainly Mishti. You cannot deny that. No other state in India can produce 30 types of sweets with only milk and sugar. And this is amazing that you have such a great portfolio, which unfortunately as a business has not been leveraged at all.
So,
And there is a great opportunity for women to enter into this business, empower themselves, add additional income for the family. But this aspect has been neglected. Third, that the Mishti making as a business is going to undergo a change because the unit economics of the Mishti making has changed. See, there was a time when a Moira used to work and used to get about 200, 250 rupees per day. Now, if you want to employ a Moira to make Mishti in a small Mishti shop, you have to pay about 900 rupees. That is difficult. The business does not support that cost economics. So there has to be upgradation of technology, there has to be adoption of new technology which is readily available but not adopted by the Mishti businessmen. Somehow the Mishti businessman has never taken Mishti making as a serious business, because you will find that fake Mishtis are operating all over the country, which is called as Bengali sweets, but this is possible because we have never thought of, securing our brand, that Bangla Mishti. Why should I allow you to do and put a board and sell Mishtis which are not Bangla Mishti and you make money out of it?
So what, according to you...
The problem,
Sorry.
the basic issue is that if you want to secure and flourish your Bangla Mishti heritage into a business proposition, you have to be like a businessman. So you have to protect.
Exactly.
So
That's what
first thing is that you have to secure and protect your Bangla Mishti brand. For that, the industry has to take steps. But the problem is, we don't have an infrastructure as far as Bangla Mishti is concerned where somebody has to own that brand. Who will own it? Individual shops can't own a Bangla Mishti brand. So the industry has to come forward and have the right kind of infrastructure so that the industry is secured about the brand. You were talking, or somebody was talking about the Rasagolla, the tag. Similarly, Bangla Mishti should be, the brand must be secured.
So how does your institute protect
secondly, the other
these
issue
recipes?
is that since there is a huge opportunity for women to enter into this business and really get into the business and flourish this business and create employment opportunities, I tried an experiment that I held 2 workshops at Bolpur with tribal women. And we tried to train them to make 10 Bangla Mishtis. You see, tribals are not very Mishti oriented, but they had no clue what Bangla Mishti is all about. But they have native intelligence and they have nimble fingers. I mean, they did learn in 2 days 10 Mishtis, and most of these women are now making Mishtis and selling it in the Mela. All the melas happen during this winter, and among their own community. So Mishti could help a woman earn around 5,000 to 6,000 rupees.
So
net.
your suggestion is to start grassroots again. Is that what you're saying?
Secondly, if you visit any of the small town in Europe, you will find that there are desert institutes. There is an institute which helps young men and women to learn various types of cake making, various types of bakery product or desserts, but we don't have one.
In fact, interestingly, I want to go on to Ishita at this point, and I'll come back to you on that. Ishita, you have extensively worked in, Bengal, both the Bengals, Bangladesh and India, and gone into really depth. Your stories were fascinating this afternoon. So I want to, and worked with labor and things. So my question to you, first question is, have you actually found or seen any women protagonists when you go into these kind of sectors, who really shine out and can be empowered for that matter?
Women protagonists are always there, have always been there as far as the history of sweets are concerned, right? Look at the cookbook authors. There's a cookbook dedicated to sweets, got published in 2010, called Mishti Mukh by Shalmoli Mukherjee, right? The first, and there's a very interesting history, the first English book on Bengali sweets is written under a pseudonym Mrs. J. Haldar. Even if that happened, even if Mrs. J. Haldar happened or identified as a man as well, doesn't matter, still had to take a female pseudonym, right? I think, but this is where power politics also comes into play. And yes, I have come across female protagonists. In Nator, a place known in Opar Bangla for Kachagulla, I have come across a sweet shop where Shubhadra Pal, but women also take up, jobs out of necessity. This is a story of necessity. The sweet shop was, let's put it this way, her husband became unwell and she had to take over the business, and entire neighborhood came to be known as, for the entire neighborhood, it came to be known as Pishimar Dukan, right? And now if you really take into account this Pishimar Dukan, paternal sister, right? And so father's sister, paternal, father's sisters, that's a kinship term. Now, Shubhadra's Pal's story is not very different from the stories that, we may still find. I'm still hopeful. This is one protagonist I have come across in my small research, let's put it this way. But if you recall, when you had organized Marketplace, I had, invited under your insistence, I had invited Baby Ghose, who is an important part of the supply chain because she is part of that invisible labor industry where her labor has been invisibilized because she makes the milk cream at home, that stiff layer of short. She makes it at home Robi Ghosh, her husband, sells it at the shop, right? Now, this is a story that needs to be, I think this is where the code lies, that, probably there are enough, literature available that, when you think about the supply industry, clearly it's family-based labor. So on one hand, when we're thinking about empowering them, it should not also be because, it should not be at the risk of, because wherever feminization of workforce has happened, and here let me wear my sociologist hat and be a little brave and throw it to this audience, it should not be at the cost that because they can come cheap. Absolutely. Or the second thing, that because it's a feminine skill, it can also be feminized, and we have seen that, what has happened to the tea garden laborers. We have ample industry. But let's create stories like the way in which Darjeeling Express, and I always take this story to my classroom because it's a group of women who were caregivers, domestic workers, who had a different relationship with food, right? Yeah. That is how I see your story in Darjeeling Express when I see the chef's table, right? When I teach it in the class, that is what I see. Similarly, in the Mishti industry, there are women, there are women like Lohona who has taken over. There are women, late Monjalika Dash, right? So there are people who have been at the helm of probably managing the business. Maybe we don't know enough about the female karigors like Shubhadrapal, like Baby Ghosh, maybe because we haven't paid attention to that invisible labor dynamics.
How would you encourage, what would encourage these women to come out, or what do you suggest for the industry?
I think one scope that hugely lies, because in most of the works on Mishti shops, etc., when we think about female labor, we not only need to think about, female workers within the workshop, but also the supply chain, right? One of the important, I think, aspect that needs to be retold or remembered is that women always used to make chaach, right? The stone molds were at one point a pastime, right? But now that tradition has gone completely missing, right? But still there are those places where probably this is happening. So when we think about strengthening it, right, the supply chain, women's role in the supply chain can be recognized, may be recognized, right? When the chana maker is coming, of course, there's someone who is also, milking the cow, boiling the milk, straining the chana. There must be some women doing there, right? So, to recognize that there's a family labor. The second bit, I think, and this is going to be a real struggle, is also how do you organize the working conditions and the shifts. Most of the sweet shops across Bengal, much of the work happens along the chana supplies. Correct. The chana supplies come in the evening. It can be very easy to say that let's involve more women, but it's also about, ensuring a safer infrastructure, right? And so can work happen in shifts? Probably in a mechanized unit. There are certain mechanized units where, sweet shops actually work like office hours. I have visited those units as well. But we also need to take into account there is an unorganized, labor that is involved. Feminization of workforce also should not happen at the cost of de-skilling a certain kind of, because that leads to other problems. De-skilling of a certain kind of profession, de-skilling of a certain kind of profession, and how do you really do that? So I think definitely women needs to be involved, and women can be involved. There is no reason per se.
So I'll come back to you on that, and I go to Asma at this point. What Ishita made a point that, how to encourage women, and you have been doing it so beautifully, and we have seen that example. So what, according to you, would you advise the Mishti industry today, which we're talking about, how they can involve more women from, or in commercial kitchens?
Ishita made a very, very good point about the shift, because I've said this repeatedly in all my interviews when I talk about the industry, the restaurant industry, hotel industry in this country. It is designed to exclude women. The shift patterns of 16-hour shifts that every restaurant makes into a double shift. In this country, you leave when it's dark, you come back at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. It's not brain surgery. In between lunch and dinner, you can change your shift. You can let the women go home to pick up their kids, or, to just be at home. You do not have to have someone in the restaurant 16 hours, but every restaurant will have job opportunities available for 16 hours. And it doesn't just exclude women, it excludes normal men. So what you end up with is men working in artificial light with the sound of the extractor or that 16-hour shift. They're all psychopaths. They go around attacking each other. This is the thing, that we need compassion. We need people to understand that it's not just only about women. It's about men who want to go and play sports, who want to have a normal life, work experience. That you cannot expect someone to work long hours, late at night, and have no social life, and have no family life. So I think that the first thing we need to address is we need to be more compassionate in the way that we set up shifts. In my kitchen, I have grandmothers, I have mothers, I have had 2 women give birth, 1 month after leaving, working with me, and they've come back. And it's all possible. You just need to be sitting down and you need to have the desire and the passion, because at the end of the day, we all know this, colonialism, slavery, apartheid, even occupation, all of this will end when people speak up and understand that injustice in the past has ended when someone has been brave and spoken up. And I was so happy to listen to your panelists, because there are people there who are making a difference. Because you cannot just be running a business. You need to run a social enterprise. You also need to be very political. That is what is going to change the situation for women. When women who are powerful speak up. Because the change will not happen from the bottom up, unfortunately. Not in this industry, but the power is all with the people on the top. People on the top need to speak up for the people below.
So that's excellent, and I've been asked to wrap up. I had lots of things, but I'll just throw the last question to all of you panelists. And I had this interesting introduction written by Leela Majumdar, but there's no time to read from her Rannar Boi, which I'm sure many of you have read. And the introduction itself says that, in the Year of the Women, she heard a term called Ranna Ghorer Bandi, which says the kitchen slave. And she says that I have seen the kitchen slaves, but I have seen the queens of the kitchen too. And I think the queens of the kitchen are the ones who run the world. And I think that's where what we are talking about today, and in terms of Mishti. So we can go a long way forward. So the last question I would like to ask all of you is, if hypothetically, and this is a beginning, thanks Lahona, we move towards an inclusive kitchen, or policies or implementation of policies in Mishti and in commercial kitchens in general, what would be the future be like in when women are equal to men in commercial kitchens and home kitchens? So who would like to take that first? Asma, we can start with you, since you're in a global thing, and then come to Robinda.
What is really happening? What is really?
Robinda, let her say, we'll come to you. Okay. Sorry?
I'll be very, so that others can speak. I think that, when you have equality and you have justice, I think the food will taste better. There is just a much better environment. And I think there is no reason not to have justice and fairness and equality in kitchens.
Right. Robinda, you were saying.
What is really happening is, if you look at employment of women or empowerment of women in Mishti industry, and the great rescuer at the moment is technology. See, today you have technology to make rasagullas in 1 hour, 2,000 rasagullas. And we have that in our Mishti lab. We make rabdis, we have a machine. We want to make pantua, we have a machine. We want to Mishti Doi, we have a machine. Now, we have to now develop women technicians. You see, Moiras won't be able to do this, handling this machine, because these machines are simple to operate, but they are machines anyway. They need a little bit of technical expertise. And Moiras will now transform into technicians. And there, the women has a very, very important
role to play. I get that. It's an excellent, I think, point, and I'm sure a lot of Mishti makers and through the media we can reach out to them. Lily, how would you wrap this up?
I will just give you a small example. As a test, we posted a Facebook ad where we said that as a women's empowerment project, we are trying to set up Rasgulla stations all over the country. Because it is something like you walk in and you see the Rasgullas being made mechanically, hygienically, standardized, and run by women. And we received 1,100 inquiries in 1 week throughout India.
Wow.
So
that's wonderful. I will take this.
The soil is ready. The only problem is the mindset.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone would want to take these stories off stage. Sorry, we are running out of time, really. Lily, what's your take?
Oh, just very briefly, that I think often the conversation is so much about kind of how women experience the negative effects of a workplace, and there's less conversation about what women chefs can bring to the workplace. And so again, I'm so inspired to be on a panel with such esteemed colleagues or role models to me, because it's like, people have kind of, I think, moved towards this paradigm of like a celebrity male chef who's some kind of an artist genius. But to me, like the real artist genius is like a mom at the end of the day.
Or his grandmother, perhaps.
And see, like, what's for dinner, and make something that a child who's, not to be too specific, like 2.5 years old is not going to toss right on the floor, like that to me is creativity. And I think if you unleash those talents in a professional kitchen, amazing things, can and do happen.
Absolutely. So Ishita, the food and politics of Mishti in the future.
Equal wages. Equal wages will be the way. Sorry, that's what labor, food, and migration research has done to me. Equal wages is very important. Second, of course, and this because a friend tried to run an all-women team, and one of the problems she kept on facing in Delhi is ensuring safe transportation, right? So, for things to change, one is, we can talk about training. Training can be done. But there also needs to be a safer infrastructure in place, right?
The basics have to be right. Women needs are more.
Yeah, because, power equation is very, is very screwed up. And 1,000 years of screwing up cannot be undone in 1 or 2 years, right? But I think the hope remains for the fact that, I really want to see 10 years down the line, when someone is sitting in this podium, she will not only be able to tell a story about Subhadra Pal or a baby Ghose, but at least she will be able to tell about 10 other stories.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way of ending this conversation. What do you feel that, bringing this platform itself, Lahona has done a great job and getting in more women into the Mishti. I'm looking forward to more, Robinda's trained ladies to put up Mishti shops, and the one like the tasting one which we did downstairs, some of those Mishtis have really died down. Bring them back to the shops. We want to have those Mishtis and enjoy them. Thank you very much for your patience. It's really, I think, 7 in the evening and we need to wrap up. Thank you very much.